Thank you. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm an economics professor here at Johns Hopkins, and as such, I wanted to talk to you about what is probably the single largest, most serious economic challenge, probably of our time and certainly for your generation, and that is the aging of our population. Over the next few minutes, I want to talk to you about, if I can figure out how to get my clicker to work. Over the next few minutes, I want to talk to you about how America as a society is getting older, about how that aging, if we continue on our present course, is bad for retirement security, harmful for the federal budget and fiscal policy, and ultimately slows economic growth. So this isn't all about the dismal science. I want to give you an optimistic note of how, instead of aging as we are today, we can age gracefully. And instead of economic decline, graceful aging can lead to actually more vibrant economic growth, more vibrant retirement security in the future. So first of all, it's abundantly clear, we know the demographics, America is getting older. Looking just back to 1980, there was just over 20 million people above the age of 65 in the United States. In other words, only 20 million senior citizens in the United States. Today, it's more like 50 million. And as we project forward, we're headed towards 100 million. And not only are the number of seniors growing, but their age is rising as well. If you just look at the chart behind me, you'll see the number of folks that are above age 75, above age 85, even above age 95 is increasing as a share of the elderly population. Now, there are a few things driving this. One is we're living longer. How many folks know what the life expectancy was when the Social Security Act was passed in 1935? It was age 65. It was actually the normal retirement age at the time. If we go back to 1900, over 100 years ago, the average life expectancy was only around 50. The average life expectancy for those that reached 65, and that wasn't all that common, was only about 77 years old. Today, the average life expectancy is 80. And if you're lucky enough to live to 65, the average life expectancy is 85. People are spending 20 plus years in retirement. And every year, and this is a good thing, by the way, every year that life expectancy is growing. Every year we're living longer. Every generation is living longer than the one before it. But by the way, as we're living longer, we're not working longer. In fact, as we look over time, we see that we're living longer and longer, and we're retiring earlier and earlier. The most common age people retire is now age 62. The most common age is 62. That's the first time you can collect Social Security. Now, some folks retire at 65 when you can collect Medicare. Some folks retire at 66 or 67. Social Security's normal age. But on average, people are retiring at 63. 63 is the average retirement age. That's way down from even 30, 40, 50 years ago. As we're living longer, we're retiring earlier. And here's the kicker. Not only are we living longer and not working longer, but our fertility is way down. So previously, yes, we were living longer, but we were always having more kids, more workers to replace the older ones. We were always having more people coming after the generation in order to fund our economic growth, in order to fund our senior citizens. Historically, in the United States, couples have had about 3 kids per couple, right? Or there's been about 3 kids born for every woman. That's above replacement. That's a level of fertility that allows for economic growth and that allows for population growth. Briefly, after World War II, we had a baby boom, the baby boom population, and we were having about 4 kids for every couple. But since then, things crashed, right? And basically, since the baby boom population came into this world, the fertility rate in the United States has averaged right around replacement level, which is 2 people for every couple. That means for every 1 person, they're going to have 1 kid. That's enough to keep our population stable, but it's not enough to keep a growing population of workers to pay for our seniors. Add all this together, and we have a situation where our dependency ratio, or our senior dependency ratio, is declining over time. Just looking at the Social Security system, back in 1950, we used to have 16 workers paying in for every retiree pulling out, for every retiree receiving benefits. But fast forwarding to 1960, when the program was more mature, we had 5 workers paying in for every 1 retiree receiving benefits. That meant that each of us in this room would have to pay 20 cents in order to give $1 to a senior. That's not so bad, 20 cents out of your income for $1 of senior income. Today, there's only 3 workers for every retiree, which means that each of us has to contribute 33 cents for every $1 a senior receives. And over time, by 2035, there's only going to be 2 of us paying for every senior. In other words, two people have to split the cost of a senior. That's 50 cents each of us have to contribute just for $1 of senior income. This declining ratio of workers to retirees is problematic for a lot of reasons. And it brings me to my next point, which is aging is bad for economic growth. Aging is bad for society, and we need to do something about it. First of all, our population aging, not death panels, because there are other options we'll talk about. First of all, population aging is problematic for retirement security. If people are living longer but they aren't working longer, it means they have less savings available to finance their retirement. Your choices then are you need to either consume less during your working life and then save more, or you need to stretch the same amount of savings over more years. It's a lot harder to retire for 30 years than for 15. You need a lot more savings to do it. Secondly, our aging population is seriously problematic for our national debt. So today, our new president entered office with a higher debt relative to the economy than any president besides Harry Truman. Right now, debt is 77% of GDP, which is a record other than during World War II. Over time, it's projected to double. By 2050, even under current law, we expect debt to double as a share of GDP. This is more than entirely driven by the aging of our population. It's more than entirely driven by the rising cost of Social Security, which is our senior retirement program, and Medicare, which is our senior health program. In fact, if those two programs just grew at the pace of economic growth, we would have the declining debt ratio. Fiscal policy in the United States would be stable. And this isn't just a problem for the debt, it's a problem for these specific programs. Social Security in particular is self-financed. People pay your payroll tax into Social Security, and then other seniors receive benefits from that trust fund. In the past, especially in the 90s, we had more paying in than we had pulling out. We had the baby boomers in their prime working years contributing payroll taxes and a relatively small senior population. So we built up a surplus, we built up a trust fund of about $3 trillion. Now, every year, we're drawing from that trust fund. By sometime between 2030 and 2035, that trust fund is going to be empty. There'll be no money left in it. At that point, the law says everyone in the program, doesn't matter if you're rich or you're poor, doesn't matter if you're age 62 or 92, everyone in the program sees their benefits cut immediately by 20%. Now, we can prevent that, but to prevent that, we basically need to make adjustments equivalent to over $11 trillion in today's dollars. That's our unfunded obligations. All of this to address the effect of the aging population on the Social Security system. And perhaps most importantly, as we age, we're experiencing a permanent slowdown in economic growth. Historically, there have always been booms and busts, but the United States on average has grown about 3% from year to year. Half of that was labor force growth. 1.5 of that 3% was the fact that each year, more people were entering the labor force or working more hours. Now, we're only projected to see that labor force growth at 0.5% a year. So instead of 1.5 percentage points growth from labor force, we're getting 0.5%. And that means our economic growth is going to slow, and in fact, already has slowed from 3% year to year to 2%. Now, that might seem like a small difference, but over time it accumulates, and it's quite significant. It could be the difference between a prospering society and one that's just holding on. Luckily, it's not all bad news. Just because demographics is destiny, we can't stop aging, but what we can do is address it. What we can do is learn to age gracefully. And I would propose a 3-part plan that will get us most of the way there. Part 1 is we need to reform our immigration laws. Part 2, we need to fix our Social Security system. And Part 3, perhaps most importantly, we need to change the way we think about retirement. We need to change our retirement culture. So let me go through these in order very quickly. First of all, if your problem is you have too few workers for retirees, part of the solution should be to try to have more workers per retirees. We could do that the old-fashioned way, but that requires a big boost in fertility and then to wait 18 to 30 years before we actually get the labor participation, right? A much quicker fix for this is to increase the number of especially young and especially skilled immigrants coming into this country, but to increase the total number of immigrants. This will boost economic growth. This will secure, or this will strengthen our trust funds. This will improve the debt situation. And this will help to rebalance our demographic situation in the immediate term. Now, I want to be careful. This is not a permanent solution, because remember, if we bring young workers in, eventually they too are going to be old. Eventually they too will be on the wrong side of the dependency ratio. But what immigration reform can do is buy us time, is buy us a more gradual transition to the young population we used to have to the older population we're already starting to have. So immigration is step one. But step two is we should be treating basically the biggest symptom of our aging population, which is the decline and ultimate insolvency of our Social Security system. The thing is, fixing Social Security is actually incredibly easy. If instead of speaking about aging, I just negotiated with all of you a Social Security reform plan in my 18 minutes, we'd have about 14 minutes left to spare. Okay? You go to socialsecurityreformer.org. You can design a Social Security reform plan. There's only a few levers. We can boost the Social Security retirement age. We can slow the benefit growth, maybe just for higher earners who don't need it as much. We can increase the amount of income coming into the program, maybe by increasing income subject to the Social Security payroll tax cap. The solutions are pretty straightforward. The politics are really hard. But I promise if our politicians come together and agree on some compromise, A, I think they're going to get more thumbs up than middle fingers, as my old boss Al Simpson used to say. But B, the economic benefits will be huge. No longer will we have an insolvent Social Security system. No longer will we have a rapidly rising debt. And on top of all of that, workers will have clear signals about how much to work, how much to save and invest, and how to plan for their future. Right now, they have none of that. But that brings me to my last point, which is we need to start rethinking retirement. The old way of retiring was you got a job at age 20 or so, you worked until age 63 or so, and then you retired and did something completely different. You know, you moved to Florida, or you moved into a smaller home. That doesn't work anymore. That makes sense in a manufacturing economy that's not very dynamic. It doesn't make sense in our modern economy that's increasingly both service and information-based. It doesn't work in our Uber economy, where you can have 10 jobs or one job. It doesn't work in an economy where people can move fluidly from job to job and don't even have to be in the same physical location. We need to rethink retirement. Yeah, some people should still retire at age 62 or 63, maybe earlier. Others could stay at their exact same job until age 70 or 75 or 80. And if they're happy doing that, we should be encouraging them to. But there's a bigger group of people that fall into neither category. Neither do I want to quit exactly at age 62, nor work until I'm 150 years old, right? There's other options, though. You can transition into retirement, phased retirement. Maybe you switch from full-time to part-time. You can move to consulting. You can retire, then come back, have an encore career, have a consulting career. There's no reason a retired firefighter can't open a bar or become a bartender. There's no reason that a retired real estate agent can't teach at a community college, teach business at a community college. There's no reason that somebody that's been a mechanic for their whole life can't start doing aviation consulting. We need to stop thinking of the labor force as one fixed job with one fixed choice. Do I work or do I not work? And start thinking about it as a breadth of choice where each individual makes the best decision for them, and our economy and our economic policy welcomes those decisions. Now, if we can do that, I suspect, one, people will work longer, and I suspect they'll work longer in much more flexible ways. And the benefits of that would be huge. First of all, we'd see a big uptick in economic growth. These are estimates from the Congressional Budget Office. This is basically the official scorekeeper of the United States government. And they say if everybody just works 1 year longer, the economy will eventually be 2.5% larger. If everybody works 3 years longer, the economy will be 7% larger. And remember, this doesn't have to happen all at once. This can be a gradual change. Secondly, working longer is good for workers. The longer you work, the fewer years you've got to take care of yourself for in retirement, and the more savings you will have to do so with. Again, these are some estimates of how much money you'd have if you just put a typical amount into a 401k, say $5,000 a year, depending on your age of retirement. If you retired at 62, you'd basically be able to spend $26,000 a year. That would be your income. If you just retired at 66, you'd be able to spend $35,000. Retiring later is good for workers, at least for workers that are able. And by the way, the literature on this, though not universal, all points in one direction, which is that working longer and working in more flexible ways is good for folks' wealth, it's good for their health, and it's good for their happiness. There's one study that basically says if a worker works a year more, they can spend 10% more each year for the remainder of their lives. That's a much happier retirement, right? 10% more. They actually looked at low-income seniors and found it was more like 15% more. It also turns out we're healthier when we work longer, both mentally and physically, and we're happier. We're more satisfied when we work longer. Humans weren't meant to do the same thing their entire life and then just one day stop, right? Humans are dynamic, and we live in a dynamic society. We're meant to be able to fulfill our, to use our skills to the best of our ability and to fill our own goals of happiness. That doesn't happen with some binary retirement system. This is the good news. The good news is there's a win-win here, right? If we think the way we retire, if we fix our Social Security system, if we increase immigration to manage the transition, we don't have to have economic decline. We can age gracefully, and we can achieve economic prosperity. Thank you very much.